Hello and warm welcome to Power News. I'm Juhi Rajput. In today's episode, we're going to have a discussion on financial viability of power distribution sector, power sector reforms, and challenges before Uday to become successful. To discuss the same, we have been joined by Dr. Arun Kumar Verma, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Power, Mr. Desh Deepak Verma, Chairman, UPERC, Dr. Dinesh Arora, ED REC and CEO REC PDL, Mr. Shubhranshu Patnaik, Partner Deloitte, and Mr. Sanjay Banga, Vice President and Chief Business Development, Tata Power Delhi Distribution Limited. I'd like to start the discussion with Dr. A.K. Verma. Uday is the financial turnaround and revival package for state discoms to bring financial viability in state power distribution business. Unlike other bailout packages, central government is very confident of Uday becoming the fulcrum of the power sector reforms. How has been the development so far?
Quite encouraging development on Uday front. So, as many as 16 states, 15 states and one UT have already entered into the MOU with the Government of India, and I think 77% of the total debt of these states have already been issued as bond. These states have also fixed up their targets, say quarter-wise, as to how they have to work to reduce their AT&C losses, to bridge the gap of the SES-AR, gap between SES and ARR, and their performance is quite satisfactory so far, because they have reduced their interest burden by around 2,500 crore, and similarly their AT&C losses are showing positive sign in 6-7 states in the first quarter. So I understand they have already done the major part of the financial engineering, as well as for the operational efficiency also the factors required for the sustainability has already been started.
Mr. Banga, unlike other schemes, Uday has come up with more stringent riders. One of them is to achieve AT&C targets of 15% within 3 to 4 years. Short period of 3 to 4 years, and discoms feel that AT&C loss reduction is a very difficult target to achieve, as it demands huge infusion of funds to develop an efficient power distribution system across the state. So how challenging would it be for the states to achieve this target within 3-4 years?
See, Uday is it's addressing two aspects. One is the financial, as Mr. Verma said, and the other is the operational. On operational front, it says that AT&C losses have to brought to the level of 15%. It gives some guideline in terms that smart metering is to be implemented. How those losses will come to 15%, there are other issues linked with that. It is not the financial restructuring also, because let us say if the financial condition when it was good, the losses were high. So, if you do some financial restructuring in bringing the interest component less, it is not going to reduce losses in any case. Smart metering, in my view, is also a myth. It is not going to bring the losses, because where the meters are installed, if you just install smart meters there, it will not bring much losses. There are substantial consumer base which is not in the metering net itself, because if you see the billing efficiency in some of the states, the billing efficiency itself is around 70-75%, means those consumers are still not in your billing net. To bring them into the billing net, first what you have to require is to do the each and every consumer's indexing and bringing into the billing net. There are other issues, the commercial inefficiencies are there and the operational inefficiencies are there. I think what more required is that if the Uday does not bring losses to 15%, what is the alternative? No one has, I am not finding it that plan B is this. If it is not happens, plan B is this.
Quite a good number of states do have the AT&C losses at present, which is either 15% or lower than 15%. So, and we know that if one state can do, other state can also do. So that's not undoable, that's doable. So it's possible that energy auditing is done, the loss pockets are identified, and then say interventions are done. Ultimately, losses are not because only of the say poor infrastructure. It's also because of there are not good management. So once you have identified the problems, identified the problem pockets, then managerial interventions can be done there.
About Uday, I am happy but not overly excited about Uday. It is a package, it's a bailout package. which is different from what has been given in the past. It is much more than that. It ropes in the state governments, so they become responsible. But that's your make-believe world, that just by doing this, the state government would become so responsible, the states will become so responsible that they will actually start acting upon the reduction in the losses. It's good to say that the gap between the ARR and the supply, that gap, the tariff, that should be bridged by giving a tariff hike. But you see, there is a problem. Like in UP, if you actually give in for all the regulatory gap that it has, the tariff would increase by about 40%. So who will be able to take this? So let's be practical with this theory that you should bridge the gap. So what you need to address is the other problems. And the problems are the problems of theft, the problems of losses. Unless you address those problems, and that's my only concern about Uday, that Uday has talked about it but has not addressed it so intensely as it should have. Like in UP, I'll give you the statistics, about 3.4 crore households there, and the people with connections are only 1.14 crores. And it is well known fact that everybody is using electricity. So the load of 3 crore households is being borne by 1.4 crores. So unless you bring more people into the network, so there are more shoulders to carry the burden, till then this problem will not be solved. The UDA has touched upon, they had good intentions, probably they had the limitation that it can be done only with the state government collaboration and state government support.
No, I was just saying that like Uday sir cannot be seen in isolation. Uday is an over-encompassing program, and the other two schemes, the flagship programs, which is Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana for rural electrification or its integrated power development scheme for urban, has to be a part of it. So both these schemes have been dovetailed, and Uday has been made as an encompassing, setting the targets, and Government of India regulating it through these two schemes, which it provides the funding to the states.
Uday does not advocate for giving a shock to the consumer. Uday has all pro-consumer components in it. So it is not that Uday wants that the gap between SES and ARR should be bridged by increasing the tariff. We are also concentrating on reducing the cost of supply. And the first and foremost is the cost of power. So almost in any DISCOM, the cost of power is around 80 to 85%. Rather, sometimes it goes quite close to 90%. There are DISCOMs which are operating on this kind of economics.
So talking about the operational performance which is required, IPDS and DDUGGY, one for urban and other for rural, will be critical foundation pillars for 24/7 power for all homes. To strengthen distribution infrastructure, DISCOMs need to be financially stronger, and it will take some time for Uday scheme to reap dividends, and thus there are question mark over DISCOMs' capability to strengthen the networks. What do you have to say?
That's why this Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana, which replaced the previous scheme, has dovetailed the financial sustainability of DISCOMs. System strengthening is primarily a state government's responsibility or state utilities' responsibility. For the first time, even for the existing structures for replacement of the distribution transformers which were burnt, or for augmentation of substations, new substations, not only in the virgin areas where the new rural electrification has to take place, but even in the existing area is allowed. And it's a sizable amount, about 20,000 crore is kept for system strengthening and for rural households connectivity. Similarly, we have roughly about 15,000 crores kept for feeder segregation, which again is supposedly has been done by most of the states, and only two states, if I am correct, Uttar Pradesh and Tamil Nadu are the states who have not taken any steps for feeder segregation, but we have sanctioned them in the present Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana. Third component, meterization. The metering is primarily again a state government's responsibility, but this has been dovetailed in this scheme to enable or facilitate state governments to do 100% meterization, starting from feeders to distribution transformers to consumers, which eventually is going to benefit the state, the utilities, to recover the money from them. So along with this, a renewable component has also been added. So the Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana is a very thought after scheme, dovetailing the experiences of the previous schemes and you know, what the good experiences we had got from Gujarat and Andhra Pradesh utilities, and then built it over and given huge flexibility to the states to choose what component suits them the maximum and then go for it.
It's time to take a short break here. You keep watching Power News. Welcome back. You're watching Power News. Dr. Verma, ultimately the success or failure of the Uday scheme would rest majorly on the operational performance of the DISCOMs, and DISCOMs should run professionally. And if DISCOMs don't start operating professionally and function efficiently, then it is being said that the Uday will not going to bring any change in the current position of the DISCOMs.
I'm finding that Uday, the EG, say taking over of Uday by different state is itself a kind of testimony that the states want to improve. I mean, ultimately across the political complexion, if you see the states like UP, the state like Kerala is coming up, states different state of Bihar, they all have a political complexion different than that of government of India, but they are joining. So obviously there is a willingness of one and all to improve the utility.
As Dr. Verma said, yes, power or electricity is now has become one of the most important sought after reforms states want to do, and sooner or later, I again say the north and the northern and the eastern states will definitely pick up the strains of how the western and the southern states have shown, and perhaps they will also toe the same line.
What has happened is that in the distribution sector, no competition has come. Even the competition which has come from the private sector has been limited to the urban areas. The private sector is not willing to take up the rural areas. So this is also one of the objectives that the government of India needs to push, that wherever the DISCOMs exist, don't let them operate in a situation of monopoly. Competition is the best reformer. The moment you bring the competition, the reforms will take place.
There is a problem here that we are not going to get very soon competition, especially in the rural areas. But my point is that befitting waiting for that, we need to make ourselves or the public sectors more transparent, more technology oriented and more accountable, which can also work. In fact, the app which we started, the Garv app, which highlights each and every stage of milestones of village progress, has put everyone onto the tender hooks.
I think you rightly said that because of this huge capital investment that needs to be made in these in distribution sector, not many private companies are interested. I don't know how your experience goes. After Delhi, I don't think so Tata Power has really ventured into
No one has come out with any model.
Yes.
If anyone comes out with a model where it creates value for all, that will be most receptible to us. Unfortunately, I would just say it's a myth that the distribution private companies will not come to rural areas. You create a model, mix urban and rural, and all private companies will come.
So, if I can add here, there is the political economy of distribution. That's not going to go away. That's going to stay in a developed country like ours for some time to come. Now, that is not going to be solved if you bring a private sector in, as we are saying in Delhi and other places as well. That's not going to go away. But where the private sector helps, and it has been, that also is a mixed bag, but mostly it helps, is obviously the management of the organization. That transforms when the private sector comes in, because there is no government interference in management, not necessarily the political economy of the operations, which is to do with regulations, which is to do with allowing a utility to function on its own. That's not going to go away. We're going to live with that. But there are means and ways to manage that. Where it could help, obviously, is in the management of the organization. Now, again, I would counter that to the extent that there are well-performing PSUs who manage that environment. Unfortunately, there are very few of those at the state level. We see that at the central level, but there are very few of those unfettered, really well-performing state-level PSUs, and it's really not going to happen overnight. So there is a dedicated effort required by the state government, appreciating what requires technologically advanced. I'll repeat that. I'm not just saying IT. A distribution entity is a technologically advanced entity today. Wherever you look, there is smart grids coming in. There are much greater degree of technology advances coming in. If you do not let them operate on their own in an unfettered fashion, they're going to crumble. So that's the whole point.
So was REC found off-guarded when PM announced on 15th August that to electrify all villages in 1000 days? So please tell us that how has been the progress so far?
REC definitely was found off guarded. I'm sure, I think Secretary perhaps had a discussion in the PMO, I'm not aware of that. But when it was decided that 18,542 villages to be done in 1000 days. So the pace which was continuing earlier was say about 1100 villages in 2012-13 and 1400 villages in 1 year preceding to that. They could have taken about 10 years to do these villages. So when the PM announced that from the 15th August parapet from the Red Fort, you know, we definitely went into the huddle, we went into the micromanagement. But I think, and public sector does work very well when you give targets to them, especially when they are set up from the top.
It's time to take another short break here. You keep watching Power News. Welcome back. You're watching Power News. In today's episode, we're having a discussion on financial viability of power distribution sector. So we'll quickly touch upon the topic of cross subsidy. Mr. Bagar, the poor definitely require subsidy, but the idea of cross subsidy seems a bit unfair from the industry perspective. The industrial consumers have started drifting from the discoms, and it has already started happening in Delhi. So is there a possibility of a scenario where the discom will be serving only the subsidized customers in the future?
In next 5 years, this is going to happen. If you see the tariff, it is heavily tilted towards the industrial and commercial consumers, which is not the case in western part of the world. Average tariff of an industrial and commercial consumer is coming around 10 rupees now, whereas the solar cost him is around 5-6 rupees at maximum. There is a huge amount of research which is going on in storage. The day that will come into affordable range, all those consumers will move out. Now, if they move out, then the tariff has to go up for these subsidized consumers as such. So, I think that personally I consider is the most disruptive force which will change the distribution utility, because the way we are treating it, we are not treating it as a business, we are funding it, feeding it. There are many other issues. Most of the utilities where even the 10% loss level is there, you will see the tariff is not equal to the cost of supply even.
Alright, so what could be the economical or viable way of subsidizing? Probably Mr. Verma and Mr. Patnaik could talk about that. What could be the economical or viable way of subsidizing agriculture and other consumer categories? One way could be that state should introduce uniform power tariff for all sectors and give targeted subsidies which are paid into the accounts of the parties concerned, depending on the economic status and kind of crops they grow in each region. Do you think it is possible or viable?
See, I mean, even if you take the history of developed countries, there is subsidy. There's subsidy which they have given to consumers. So the history, whether it is capital subsidy or operational subsidy, is the issue. Capital subsidy existed the world over. Even in the developed country as the US, they had significant capital subsidy for rural electrification. Coming to operational subsidy, yes, you require some sustainable tariff, but that's a choice of the government, of the state government to make. It's a political choice. If they wish to really make a choice that for whatever reasons, for food security, for agricultural sustainability, the tariffs have to be low, and they make that in the full cognizance of, in full wisdom, then that subsidy needs to be provided by the state government. That provision exists under the Act and the policy, and that needs to be given. Now, you talked about efficiency, which is another aspect to it, whether that is being efficiently administered, whether that's being used as a ruse to hide, losses and all. Yes, that might be an issue which is happening currently, and a lot of states demonstrate this disturbing fact where, you have a rise in agricultural related losses. If that is the case, then yes, DBT or direct benefit transfers could help. But there are issues around that. The issue first is that not all consumers are linked to Aadhaar, for instance, not electrical consumers. Only 1 or 2 states asked for Aadhaar, thinking forward, like Andhra Pradesh, and have some linkages in their existing billing database. So it's going to take time to implement, but the time has come. I mean, DBT, I think, in electricity will happen because that's one of the largest subsidy recipient industry. So it will happen, and efficiency should come in through direct benefit transfer.
Every consumer should be metered. I think most of the regulator have given this regulation also that nobody should be unmetered. Rather, in a state like Gujarat, I have seen that there is a complete regulation that all the agriculture consumers should also be metered. but doing it retrospectively, I mean those, because initially they were metered consumer, then they became flat rate consumer, now again converting into the metering. I mean that has got some kind of political implications. So one has to be very cautious on that. I mean the governance cannot be bereft of the political consideration, because we are in a democratic polity and it matters. So it's a matter of creating awareness also, it is a matter of preparing the consumer also to take up. But once the all consumers are metered consumer and the electricity is well audited, then it's a matter of just efficient delivery of your subsidy, how to do it. Then it can be much better, the situation could be much better, but then at the same time, power for irrigation and power for industry will be in two different rates in our country.
So another point which was raised is that some of the DISCOMs use subsidy as a black hole for manipulating their losses. As some experts feel that few agriculture-based DISCOMs are using it to manipulate it and to meet out the AT&C loss targets. They translate the subsidy into the electricity sold. So how could that be tackled? So probably what Dr. Verma, metering yes.
The DBT has to be introduced only to ensure that the subsidy goes only to people for whom it is meant, and it is not camouflaged to cover up the theft and the losses. So it is therefore very important that we bring in the concept of the DBT sooner than later.
We have an excess capacity but no takers. Many states are surrendering long-term PPAs. How safe is it for DISCOM to surrender PPA and go for spot power purchases? Dr. Verma.
Because of the surplus power generation, because you have added some 45,000 megawatt in the last 2 years only to your system. This kind of growth rate was not there earlier. So now you are having a lot of surplus, and that surplus, because this is also a very typical situation where you have a surplus power but still you have dark area in our country.
Absolutely, that's the problem area.
So in these circumstances, and the DISCOM health is not in a very financial health is not a good situation. So everybody would like to go for a cheaper power, and that is why intentions or I'll say some kind of efforts have been seen in this direction, that people are not honoring the long-term PPA. Because in the past, when long-term PPA were entered into, that was the time of, say, scarcity syndrome. I mean, when you were not sure that you will get the adequate amount of power to cater to your consumers. Now things are changing. So in these circumstances, obviously the market will readjust itself, I am sure. So some new mechanism will come out.
Yeah, I think that, but the sad point is, if you see the exchange prices, they are 252 rupees. In winter, in night time, the power is available at 90 paisa. But still there are places where the DG set is running and the consumer is paying 16 rupees, and he wants that you give me power at 5 rupees or 4 rupees, like that. So on the one side you have a surplus, on the other side you have utilities who are either cash starved or they have some more their limitations and they are not supplying power 24/7.
Ministry has embarked on a new path. It's a very well thought of scheme which has been launched by the ministry. Definitely there will be new obstacles, there will be new challenges. Willingness should be there, and I think with that all the problems could be resolved. I wish Uday is really successful in bringing the reforms in the sector. With this, I'd like to thank all the panelists for joining us here. Thank you so much.